Great to be catching up with Northern Victorian MLC for the Derryn Hinch Justice Party, Tanya Maxwell. How are you, Tanya?
I'm great, Ricky. How are you? And a very good morning to all your listeners.
Yes, thank you. Look, we're doing very fine, and in fact, our own Wayne Phillips is heading out to the Speed Field Days very soon in your part of the world. So we will look forward to speaking with more of the listeners on the ground there. We've got a fairly heavy topic to talk about today. Naturally, when you're focused on justice and criminal justice, sometimes the topics are heavy. Can you walk us through, first of all, just what the arrangements are when it comes to when a victim's remains can't be found in a murder or similar case?
Absolutely, Ricky. Look, currently in Victoria, we have legislation which is no body, no parole. So if an offender doesn't disclose where the body is, then they're not entitled to parole. But what happens then in that instance is that offender can just do their time and then have a straight release. So they don't apply for parole, they do their original sentence and released with no monitoring, no requirements to report to corrections. So they're a free person.
Yeah, so if someone's committed a murder, you would think, or most people I think would assume that they get a life sentence, but a lot of times they don't. It might be 20 or 30 years jail, and what you're talking about is when they've served that 20 or 30 years, they basically become a free citizen again.
Absolutely. And look, Ricky, in all honesty, very, very few people receive even that 25 or 30 years. Now, we know that plea bargaining has a place, but often the charges are downgraded, so they never really get that hefty sentence. And that's been something that for many, many, many years people have complained about, that our justice system is a joke because people commit these horrendous crimes, these very serious absolutely abhorrent crimes, and they don't seem to be incarcerated for what the public consider to be long enough. So what we're putting forward today in Parliament is that we're calling on the government to implement a no body, no release practice for serious violent offenders who have been found guilty. So they have to have been found guilty of an offence that involves the death of another person whose body remains missing.
And there's an example of that, I think, from Mildura you've highlighted. Exactly.
And we've had numerous cases where this has happened, and people will not cooperate with police and just refuse. Now, what that does is it just prolongs that enduring trauma for those families. We know in Mabine West, the former de facto Thomas Keith Halliday was sentenced in 2010, so not really that long ago, to 32 years in jail with a minimum of 24 years, making him eligible for parole in 2042. But in that instance, he wouldn't be eligible for parole until that body is recovered, or that they give up where that body is. Then there is no opportunity for parole. You know, for many people, many victims have sort of said, well, isn't this a no-brainer? Why should they be released if, you know, our loved one hasn't been found, we haven't been able to put them to rest, and yet somebody can be sentenced and then come out of prison completely unmonitored and then continue to live their life?
Now, that example you've given probably is a good case study to sort of work through how the system currently is set up. So I forget the numbers, 24 and 32 maybe was the non-parole and the full term. So the idea has sort of been that this individual shows some sign of remorse or reform and they're eligible for parole after the first, the 24 years or whatever it is. But if they don't disclose that and they don't show any rehabilitation, and after 32 years they walk free, your proposal you're introducing in State Parliament today is saying, well, they actually should be detained for longer than their full term because they are refusing to provide closure for families and show they're rehabilitated.
That's right. Well, they're not identifying. They're not giving up where the body is.
Yeah.
So those families never know where their loved one has been placed.
Yeah.
Want of a better word, and I use that as a more gentle word because, as you said, what we're talking about is a very, very serious topic here. And why should they be released? They've committed the crime, but they still have never conveyed to police where they put the body. And I can't imagine any parent in particular knowing that their child has been murdered, or their brother, their sister, their daughter, their son, and never knowing where their body is.
And in your mind, do you see this as serving as a disincentive for the crime in the first place? Because someone might think, well, I might get 20 years or something for this, but if they never disclose where the remains are, let's say they've used a river or a fire, for instance, to cover their tracks, you think this might serve as a disincentive for them to do that in the first place?
Look, I think it can serve as a disincentive, but I also believe this is a power and control by offenders. And this practice of power and control is right through family violence and so many other cases that we see where offenders are perpetrating violence. Let's take that power away from them. They hold that power for as long as they don't give up where that body is.
All right, well, Tanya Maxwell, MLC, you're introducing that in Parliament today. There's an election in November which may see a change in government or a change in what the view is in the Parliament, but nonetheless, you'll get the ball rolling and you'll update us how that's progressing.
I will do, Ricky, and thank you so much for having me today.